What's going on, guys? It's Fight Season MMA, and today I want to make a video talking about my top 15 pound-for-pound fighters right now as of September 28th. This is a video that I really wanted to make, considering that there is so much kind of, controversy and just so much opinion within the top 15. I know Dana White has said currently that Jon Jones needs to be the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. In reality, I just don't think that is the case. I think that there's a lot of fighters that truly should be above him, and this is a list that I want to have as the best fighters inside the UFC. Negating storylines, negating everything. These are the most skilled fighters, in my opinion, inside the UFC currently. These are the fighters that I think could go into transfer weight classes, which is the big thing about pound-for-pound rankings, and these are truly the most skilled fighters in the organization right now, and I want to give a true pound-for-pound rankings list without any storylines, without anything, just who is the best fighter inside the organization. But if you guys enjoy the UFC content, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. That is the best way to help out the channel grow. And while you're down there, please turn on the post notifications just so you guys are ultimately notified when UFC content releases. But without further ado, let's go into my pound-for-pound rankings as of September 28th, 2024, and let's talk about why I believe that this is the correct ranking for the top 15 pound-for-pound fighters inside the UFC organization. At number 15, I have Shavkat Rakhmonov, and need to say less, Shavkat Rakhmonov is 18-0 with 0 losses and has 18 finishes in his professional career. He is one of the most absolutely just decimating fighters inside the organization currently. He is one of the scariest fighters in the organization currently, and he has granted himself a title shot with going on a run beating the likes of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Jeff Neal, and Neil Magny. He is one of the best fighters currently in the organization, and truly, I believe that Shavkat Rakhmonov needs a spot on this top 15 pound-for-pound list. He is such a good striker. He's got such a good chin. He has a technical jab that he can use perfectly in every single little instant. He's got great grappling ability, which is something that can translate through weight classes. I think Shavkat is probably the boogeyman at 170, and I don't think anyone can really beat him within that division. I think that Shavkat is one of the most talented fighters right now in the organization. He can truly beat a lot of different welterweights out there. I don't think that there's anyone who can really beat him, probably besides Belal Muhammad, who has the best chance, who is coming later on this list. But truly, I think Shavkat Rakhmonov is 100% deserving on a spot on my top 10 pound-for-pound fighters as of September 28th, 2024. At number 14, I have Umar Nurmagomedov. Umar had a very impressive win against Corey Sandhagen at UFC Abu Dhabi on August 3rd, and there was a lot of questions going into that fight. Is Umar really a prodigy of Khabib Nurmagomedov? Does he have the skills to compete within one of the hardest divisions inside the UFC, that being the bantamweight division? Can Umar Nurmagomedov beat someone as experienced and as well-rounded as someone like Corey Sandhagen? And all those answers were checked off with a massive yes on them. And I don't want to push Umar that far up, considering that he hasn't challenged for a title. He's only beat Corey Sandhagen inside that UFC bantamweight division, but Corey is one of my favorite fighters, considering that he is so well-rounded, he is so good, and truly that was an amazing win for Umar in that fight. I thought that fight was a little bit closer than people were saying, but truly Umar was able to go in there and beat the likes of Corey Sandhagen in a dominant fashion, and I think that is a massive thing for Umar to be able to do. Umar is so good. If you look at his striking ability coming from that Taekwondo background to training Sambo and wrestling with Eagle MMA in Dagestan, Russia, I think that Umar has a very good shot at beating Merab Dvalishvili to become the UFC bantamweight champion. I don't think that there's a lot of different fighters in the organization who would be able to beat Umar in a pound-for-pound fight. He is so well-rounded. He is so good in just being able to stay at himself, mix up the game, and ultimately throw off his opponents, and that is why Umar Nurmagomedov has to place at number 14 on my top 15 pound-for-pound rankings currently. At number 13 on my pound-for-pound rankings, I have Armen Tsarukyan, and the reason I have Armen and not Charles here, and that's a very big thing, is because Armen had that decision victory at UFC 300, which I wish that fight would have went 5 rounds, because I think we would have really truly known who the better fighter of those two were. But Armen was able to survive the murky waters. He was able to grind out a split decision victory at UFC 300, in my opinion, which was very deserving. I thought Armen won that fight by a hair. He did, but he definitely got the job done, and I think that he's going to be next to challenge Islam Makhachev, and he is one of the most talented fighters inside the organization. Beating the likes of Charles Oliveira and beating Beneil Dariush in that fashion are two amazing wins that are going to age perfectly. Beneil, yes, has gone on a 2-loss streak, but those 2 losses have only been to the likes of Charles Do Bronx Oliveira and Armen Tsarukyan. And those 2 individuals are some of the greatest UFC lightweights currently in the organization. Armen is the new generation, and Charles Oliveira is one of the best old generation of fighters. I think that this Armen Tsarukyan right now is truly a top 15 fighter in the organization. He is so good in being able to control himself, switch up the grappling and the striking. He might not be the best striker, but he has such good grappling, such good cardio, and just such IQ inside the organization to be able to win rounds and do what he needs to do to ultimately preserve his fighting career. And ultimately, I think that Armen Tsarukyan at number 13 is a great place for him to be inside the UFC pound-for-pound rankings. At number 12, I have Sean Strickland, and the reason I have Sean Strickland at number 12 is I think that Dricus Du Plessis fight was super duper close, and I think that him being one of the only fighters to go toe-to-toe with Dricus Du Plessis is a very massive star in his resume. Sean Strickland in that fight was able to show Dricus Du Plessis that he has competition inside that middleweight division, and of how Sean Strickland was able to kind of throw out that game plan to be able to beat the likes of Dricus Du Plessis. Now, that was a very close fight. I do think that ultimately Dricus got the job to win that fight, but there was a good argument and consideration for Strickland to be able to take that. Now, really, why do I think Strickland should be on this list? Because I think that Strickland's grappling is super underrated. I think he is an amazing wrestler. He just doesn't use it, and that is something that would really help him inside these fights with Dricus Du Plessis. I think if he took him down, kept him guessing a little bit more, I think that would push Sean Strickland's striking ability over the top, and that striking ability in that defense. Sean Strickland being in that Philly shell is one of the hardest fighters to hit inside the organization. He is so smart in there. If you look at that Israel Adesanya fight, he threw Izzy off so hard, and that was something that truly Israel Adesanya had never seen, and he got dominated over the course of 5 rounds. Sean Strickland is one of the most special fighters. Some fans might not think he's really that exciting, but I do think that Strickland is deserving for being number 12 on this list, considering that he has one of the most effective styles inside the UFC, and he is able to contend with the top middleweights currently inside the organization. At number 11, I have Alexander the Great Volkanovski, and Alexander Volkanovski is a fighter who was on top for the longest time. He was the pound-for-pound king for an eternity inside that organization. He was able to beat the likes of Max Holloway, beat the likes of Brian Ortega, the Korean Zombie, with an absolutely flawless resume currently, and then he lost to Islam Makhachev twice. He lost to Ilia Topuria in incredible fashion, and I still think the skills of Alexander Volkanovski deserve for him to be on the pound-for-pound list. The only thing that has gone with Alexander Volkanovski is that chin. His chin is not that great. He isn't able to take some of the best shots inside the organization from some of the strongest fighters. You look at Ilia Topuria, he hit him with a clean right over him, and that was something that really dropped and knocked out Volk very hard. That Islam fight was something that really sent him back really into the oblivion by getting hit with that left head kick. And yes, Volkanovski skillfully is one of the best fighters in the organization. If we're just talking about skill, Volkanovski needs to go farther up on this list. But overall, Volk as a fighter, that chin is really holding him back. And yes, I do think that Alexander Volkanovski deserves to be at number 11, but that chin really hampering him, of him not being able to take a shot, unlike some of these other fighters on this list, is something that I truly think is going to make Alexander Volkanovski lose a couple fights coming up. Skillfully, Volk is amazing. His chin is holding him back a little bit. At number 10, we got the flyweight king, Alexandre the Cannibal Pantoja. He is one of the best fighters inside the organization. His defense is amazing, and the only thing that you can contribute to his amazing defense is that iron chin that he possesses. Alexandre Pantoja's chin is something that really allows him to eat the brunt of a lot of different strikes coming in his direction. The fight with Steve Erceg, Brandon Moreno, Brandon Royval, he was able to weather the storm from a lot of these different punchers who throw a lot of output and throw a lot of power behind them. And he was able to stand his ground, not look like he's taking that much damage, and ultimately go down down and get the wrestling involved, show his striking ability, and show that he is one of the most exciting fighters inside the organization. Now, I know that fight with Usyk wasn't really that exciting. That fight with Royval really wasn't that exciting. But that Moreno fight back in 2023 won Fight of the Year, which was an incredible fight to be had between two amazing flyweights. Alexandre Pantoja is so good, and that chin really allows him to just expedite everything that he has inside the organization. It really amplifies all of his skills to truly be able to back up if he makes one mistake. He knows his chin can be able to take it as a primary source of defense. Now, that isn't something that's really good for longevity, but in the moment, Alexandre Pantoja's chin is holding up, and as long as that's happening, he is going to be on the pound-for-pound rankings because he is one of the hardest fighters to beat inside the UFC flyweight division. At number 9, I have Merab Dvalishvili. Merab's fight with Sean O'Malley was a very big tell inside the organization of how there is levels to the game. He was able to beat Sean O'Malley consistently through every single round that he had. It was something that was a true masterpiece in there because Merab was able to take him down. He was able to beat Sean O'Malley in the striking department. I know he lost that 5th round, but in my opinion, he won rounds 1 through 4 in very dominant fashion, and that 5th round was a lot closer than people really assume, considering, yes, he did get hurt at the end of the round, but he was controlling the time inside the octagon throughout and prior to 1 minute occurring left inside that 5th round. I do think that Merab's gas tank is his biggest weapon. I do think that Merab's chin is a little bit questionable, but he has been able to take the shots, especially from Henry Cejudo and Marlon Moraes. I think that he was really able to go in there and show everyone that Merab has a very well-rounded skill set and just really be able to be one of the best fighters inside the organization. We were really questioning Merab's ability to take on a striker, especially like Sean O'Malley, who was able to knock out his partner Aljamain Sterling, and that was something Merab being able to succeed and get through, I think really aided Merab in just his confidence himself, and that 1st round showed that everyone inside the organization that Merab is a force to be reckoned with inside the UFC bantamweight division. That's currently why he's the UFC bantamweight champion, and that is why he falls in at number 9 on inside my list. At number 8, I have Mr. Jon Bones Jones, and everyone is saying that Jon needs to be at number 1. I know Dana White is talking about that, but in reality, Jon Jones deserves to be on this list, just not at number 1. And I think at number 8, considering that he hasn't fought in a while, he beat Cyril Gane, yes, but guess what? That fight with Gane was super one-sided because Gane is such a bad wrestler. That was 100% an outcome that could have happened. I remember that the thing was we didn't think that Cyril Gane, he would be able to evade him because of his great footwork, but Jon Jones, in reality, too experienced, just kind of sat on him and just finished him immediately. Jon Jones is one of the greatest UFC fighters in history, probably the pound-for-pound GOAT, if you say, in my opinion. He was at that number 1 spot for such a long time, but in reality, this isn't 2013, 2015, this is 2024, and Jon Jones in reality is just getting older. He is still an amazing fighter. He's still got that IQ on him, with the highest IQ in UFC history, one of the best wrestling games in UFC history, one of the best frames in UFC history for that light heavyweight division. But ultimately, there are some fighters pound for pound who I think could beat Jon Jones inside the organization. I think that his age is the really big thing that's limiting him. Not saying that Jones isn't a good fighter, but I do think that Jones's best years are behind him, and I do think that the fighters above him from 7 to 1 would beat Jon Jones in a pound for pound fight. This is why I have Jon Jones at number 8. I don't think he needs to be number 1. I don't think he could be lower than number 8, though, in my opinion. I do think Jon Jones is a very tricky person to rank, but I do think that 8 is a very favorable and fair ranking for Mr. Bones Jones. At number 7, I have Belal, remember the name, Muhammad. And I know a lot of people were calling Belal Muhammad the most boring champion that could have possibly happened. But I might be honest, I'm enjoying Belal Muhammad right now more than Leon Edwards as the champion. Leon used to just disappear, and Belal Muhammad is making skits about Conor McGregor. He's doing some funny things out there, and he's going to be an active champion, considering that there's probably going to be a fight with Shavkat Rakhmonov coming up here very soon. Belal Muhammad is one of the best fighters inside the organization, considerably just because of that gas tank. He was able to just break Leon Edwards in that fight, and that was something that was truly amazing to see. Leon is one of the best fighters inside the organization, and he just missed out on this list, considering that domination from Belal Muhammad. But Belal's striking was able to be shown of how genuinely good it is because he was able to put so much pressure on Leon Edwards in different aspects. Belal is one of the most just absolutely suffocating fighters inside the organization. He truly has a very clear path for him to be one of the greatest welterweight welterweights in recent memory if he can get through Shavkat Rakhmonov, and that's a massive question. Shavkat would be the only fighter inside the organization that could beat Belal, but I do think that Belal Muhammad has a great chance to beat Shavkat as well. That is a very 50-50 fight in my opinion. I do think that Belal Muhammad's gas tank, he's got a great chin, he's got that heart, and he just remembers that he is one of the most overlooked fighters in the organization. No one thought he could beat Leon Edwards, and he was able to go in and do that, and that gives me a lot of respect upon Belal Muhammad's name. Belal is one of the best fighters in the organization, considering that he's trained with Umar Nurmagomedov, Islam Makhachev, able to get better every single time he steps foot in the octagon, and that is why Belal Muhammad is slotted in here at number 7 on my top 15 pound-for-pound fighters currently inside the UFC organization. At number 6, we got Max Blessed Holloway. Max Holloway is one of the best fighters inside the organization, considering that he just beat the number 3 ranked Justin Gaethje inside the lightweight division. He went up there and was one of those fighters who said that no matter what weight I'll fight at, I am a gladiator, and that is what Max Holloway did. He really showed that he is in the pound-for-pound rankings at the top, and he is challenging for the UFC featherweight title, is the BMF title holder, and could have got himself a UFC lightweight title shot too. Max Holloway is an absolute savage inside the UFC, and truly he is one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the organization currently. That win over Justin Gaethje is something that is going to age like fine wine. I know Gaethje's at the end of his career, but truly Gaethje is one of those different fighters who can beat anyone at any time, anywhere, and Max Holloway was able to go in there, put on a masterclass in that fight, and knock him out with 1 second left in it. He was so good in that fight, and even those fights with Alexandre Volkanovski, he was good in. That fight with Arnold Allen, he looked amazing in. He knocked out Korean Zombie. He looked amazing against Brian Ortega back in the day. Max Holloway has had one of the just most illustrious careers inside the organization. He has been in the featherweight division and been a prominent figure there for the longest time, and Max Holloway has no plans on leaving there anytime soon. Holloway is truly one of the best fighters in the organization, and that win over Justin Gaethje, beating some of the top-ranked fighters in both divisions, truly shows that Max Holloway is one of the biggest BMFs in the UFC, and he is one of the best pound-for-pound fighters inside the UFC, and that is why Max Holloway right now slots in at number 6 in my top 15 pound-for-pound rankings in the UFC organization. At number 5, I have Mr. Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall in that heavyweight division has been running rampant through these different fighters. His last 3 fights have lasted a total of 3 minutes and 20 seconds combined. And to kind of talk about how massive that stat is, he has the lowest average fight time inside the UFC in history at a combined 2 minutes per fight time. His last 3 fights combined have almost been like 1.5 his normal fight time in 3 fights, which is absolutely insane to say how crazy that is. He knocked out Marcin Tybura in 1 minute and 13 seconds. He knocked out Sergey Pavlovich in 1 minute and 7 seconds, and he knocked out Curtis Blades in 1 minute flat to become the first English heavyweight champion to retain his title in Manchester. Tom Aspinall is a bad man out there, truly is one of the most special fighters inside the organization. He is the future of the UFC heavyweight division and a future face of the organization. No one gives him as much credit as he truly deserves. Aspinall is one of those fighters that is going to be a dangerous figure inside the organization. I don't think any heavyweight right now can beat Tom Aspinall, including Jon Jones. I think that he's a stylistic matchup nightmare for anyone inside that heavyweight division. He's such a good grappler. He's so fast. He moves like a welterweight. He has the striking power of a heavyweight. He's so agile, and he's so smart inside the octagon. Tom Aspinall is an all-around beast inside the UFC heavyweight division. He is a lot to handle, and he is one of the hardest fights to game plan for, considering how well-rounded he is. And that is why Tom Aspinall, pound for pound, is one of the best fighters in the organization right now. Currently, number 4, I have Mr. Alex Poatan Pereira, and the only reason I don't have Pereira higher is Pereira is no doubt in my mind the best kickboxer inside the UFC. But this is mixed martial arts, and the fighters above him I think are just better, well-rounded fighters. But that is saying Alex Pereira is number 4 pound for pound in the organization by being just a kickboxer, and that is one of the most impressive achievements I have ever seen. He has ran through the middleweight and light heavyweight division, not knowing how to wrestle, not knowing how to grapple really, and is one of the most exciting fighters, knocking out his last 3 opponents, that being Yuri Prochazka twice and Jamal Hill once, in incredible fashion at UFC 295, 300, and 303, and he's fighting in a week from today against Khalil Roundtree Jr. at UFC 307, headlining UFC Salt Lake City because Dana White needed a fighter to save that card. Alex Pereira is so exciting. He is one of the most technical athletes I have ever seen inside the UFC octagon. Alex Pereira knows how to set up each fighter perfectly to get the knockout. He is so special on his feet. He is one of those individuals who truly cannot be beaten in the stand-up. If you fight Alex Pereira, you better be shooting for your legs, because if you stand up, you will get knocked out immediately. And that is why Alex Pereira, in my opinion, deserves to be number 4 in this list. I can't put him higher because the 3 fighters I have above him are just better, well-rounded, have more well-rounded game to them. But Alex Pereira's kickboxing is the deadliest thing we have ever seen in the UFC. He is a specialist at that, and that is what drives him to become one of the best UFC light heavyweights of all time, him winning the middleweight title, and possibly his kickboxing could lead him to be the first fighter in UFC history to be a 3-division champion. At number 3, I have Dricus Du Plessis, and Dricus Du Plessis just beat Israel Adesanya at UFC 305 in incredible fashion, in my opinion. Everyone thought that this would be the hardest fight for Dricus Du Plessis, and he was the first person to go out there and submit Israel Adesanya. Dricus is so special in his game, with the biggest asset of his being his IQ. Dricus might not be the best fighter, I've said countless times, in the striking department, in the grappling department. He has great cardio, but the biggest thing that allows Dricus Du Plessis to win so many fights is just that outstanding IQ that he possesses. He creates the best game plans for himself, which is truly one of the most amazing things to see. Dricus has some of the most exciting fights in front of him. That Sean Strickland war was an amazing fight that he had. That Robert Whittaker performance was incredible for however long it lasted. That Israel Adesanya fight was incredibly entertaining, being one of the best fights of the year so far, with Dricus Du Plessis getting the finish within that fight at UFC 305. Dricus is a special human being inside the UFC, and I think all of this motivation and this heart comes from him being overlooked at the start of his career, and now being one of the most accomplished UFC champions is something that is truly special to see, considering that Dricus Du Plessis carries the skill, the heart, the pride, and the knowledge every single time he steps inside the UFC octagon, and that is one thing and one reason that I believe Dricus Du Plessis needs to be at number 3 on my top 15 pound-for-pound rankings as of September 28th, 2024. At number 2, Ilia Topuria has to be here. Ilia Topuria is one of the best well-rounded fighters inside the UFC. What's crazy is a lot of people don't understand how good Ilia Topuria's grappling is at the young age of 26 years old. Ilia is a monster inside the UFC. He is a stylistic nightmare for any person in the organization. The amount of power he possesses, the amount of just technique he knows, and the amount of just how he can go on autopilot any single minute, allowing that boxing to take over, allowing his grappling to just submit people instantly, of how Ilia Topuria can be one of the best fighters inside the organization. That Bryce Mitchell fight, he was throwing Bryce Mitchell around like a rag doll, and he's one of the best grapplers in that featherweight division, and Ilia Topuria just showed him that there is levels to the game. The Josh Emmett fight was one of the biggest boxing masterclasses we have seen in recent memory. That fight was scored a 50-43 in my opinion, with Ilia Topuria getting a 10-7 round in that 3rd round. Ilia is so special, and he's got a hard fight with Max Holloway coming up, but that fight is one of the biggest fights of all time in my opinion. But I do think that Ilia Topuria has a great chance of winning it because of how good, how well-rounded he is, and I think that all stems from his confidence that he brings every time he steps in the octagon. Everyone thinks that Ilia Topuria is delusional, considering that he's talking about how he was the champion prior to even beating Alexander Volkanovski, of how he was having pictures posing the belt, but he is truly just manifesting everything into existence, considering he knows the skill he possesses, considering that he knows he is one of the greatest fighters on planet Earth, and of how Ilia Topuria truly is one of the hardest fighters to fight inside the UFC division, and is the rightful featherweight champion in the UFC currently. That is why Ilia Topuria is my number 2 inside the UFC pound-for-pound rankings. At number 1 right now, my UFC pound-for-pound king is still Islam Makhachev, and that is something that the UFC pound for pound is getting correct right now. Islam is so good, and for Dana White to go out there and say that Islam should be the number 3 pound for pound fighter under Alex Pereira and under Jon Jones is absolutely appalling to see, because Islam possesses the skill to win every single fight that he's in. Now, I know that a lot of people are saying that him finishing Dustin Poirier in the 5th round was a bad showing, but I truly do think that Dustin Poirier got so much better in his takedown defense prior to his fight against Islam Makhachev compared to his fight with Habib Nurmagomedov. I think Islam, just the way you can see how good his striking is, videos of how, in my opinion, he's a top 5 striker inside the UFC, and of how he is, in my opinion, the best wrestler inside the UFC organization. Coming from Eagle MMA with Habib Nurmagomedov training with his long training partner, who is the greatest lightweight in the organization currently, we got to start coming up really soon here, talking about Islam being the greatest lightweight in the UFC has ever seen. Islam, yes, I know he has 1 loss in his record and Habib had no losses on his record, but Islam might be better than Habib, and I do believe that Islam is a better version of Habib Nurmagomedov with the developed striking game. Islam is so calculated in everything that he does, and it is so amazing to see him fight because he just knows in every single step of what he's trying to do. Islam just knows that he is the best fighter in the organization. He takes it with no grain of salt. He goes out there and just demolishes any opponent. He beat Alexandre Volkanovski, who is thought to be the pound-for-pound king at the time, and considering that he said that fight was really close, he stepped in and knocked Volkanovski out. I know Volk was on two weeks notice, but being able to condition Volkanovski like that to knock him out in that brutal fashion, I think is something that really shows the levels to Islam's game. He was able to go in there and submit Dustin Poirier with one of the nastiest angle pick to Darce choke combinations the UFC has ever seen, and I truly think that has allowed Islam Makhachev to mature into one of the biggest stars inside the organization as a fighter who I truly think wouldn't lose to any single other fighter within the UFC organization in a pound-for-pound war. That being, Islam Makhachev is my number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the UFC currently as of September 28th, 2024, where Islam Makhachev is the most special fighter in the UFC currently. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please let me know what you think about down below in the comment section about my correct UFC pound-for-pound rankings. I just want to kind of go in and recap what I had. I had Shavkat Rakhmonov at number 15, Umar Nurmagomedov at number 14, Armen at 13, Strickland at number 12, Volkanovski at 11, Alexandre Pantoja at 10, Merab Dvalishvili at 9, Jon Jones at number 8, Belal Muhammad at 7, Max Holloway at 6, Tom Aspinall at 5, Alex Pereira at 4, Dricus Du Plessis at 3, Ilia Topuria at 2, and Islam Makhachev at number 1. The UFC right now is flooded with star-studded talent, and there are so many different fighters who could have been on this list, like Sean O'Malley, Leon Edwards, but this UFC currently is so deep with some of the best, with some divisions currently in the best state that they've ever had. That bantamweight division, that lightweight division are always so exciting to see, and considering that the UFC's fighters right now are more skilled than ever, this list is super hard to make. I know that there's a lot of different controversy in the makings of the UFC pound-for-pound list, but I truly think that this is a perfect UFC pound-for-pound list when we're negating storylines, when we're only talking about the best skilled fighters within the UFC organization right now. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you guys enjoyed the UFC content, and while you're down there, please turn on the post notifications just so you guys are always notified when UFC content releases. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon with more UFC content and news.